Welcome to another session with us here at Aucademy. I am Dr. Chloe Farahar. My pronouns are they, she. I'm a white person. Today I'm wearing another turban wrap thing that's like a rosy dusky pink, giant glasses and a hoodie, the Night Stages hoodie. And I am joined today by lovely Sarah Meharg. If you wouldn't mind just doing a brief physical description.
Yeah, I am a white person with two colours of pink in my hair that is quite fresh. It's short hair. I've got a pink jumper on, which has got the great pun, who runs the world? Gulls.
Gulls, like seagulls?
Gulls, as in the birds.
Yep, stealing our chippies. Yep, 100%. So it's quite exciting and quite nice for me today because I actually work with Sarah and we see each other nearly every Thursday now, don't we? So we're both specialist tutors on the National Autism Training Programme, currently training largely NHS staff in mental health settings, isn't it, largely? But today we are talking about ADHD or otherwise neurodivergent or being neurodivergent and exercise. So feel free to groan inwardly at the idea of exercise. So Sarah's going to educate today about this topic. It's not likely we're going to have many content notes, but you know, some of us might have experienced or really distressing situations or even experienced trauma around exercise, maybe particularly when you were younger, and the idea of like PE. If you're in the UK, we call physical education PE. So just note that. But largely, Sarah, you're going to talk about maybe the reasons why some neurodivergent people might struggle and what we might be able to do for some of those things that we struggle with. Is that fair?
Yes, that is a fair thing.
So what I would like to, we ask all of our guests is, I know you're Sarah, but who are you and what is or are your dedicated interests?
So I'm Sarah, I'm an occupational therapist, and when we talk about an ADHD as dedicated interests, we have a whole cupboard full to one side of interests that have gone to die in that cupboard. They are sitting there not being looked at or acknowledged. I do have some consistent interests though, which are birds, hence the jumper, and baking food, and more recently, as in the last 10 years, bizarrely, exercise is coming. Now, you won't think it's bizarre because I'm here to talk about exercise, but I am not here as someone who is sporty. I am not here as someone that 15 years ago would have been like, yay, let's go do something that makes us sweaty. So it is an interest of mine, but I think it's more an interest of mine what we're talking about today, which is those barriers to the thing that we get told we should be doing.
Lovely. And I know, because this is, I mean, we had so many topics that we could cover with you, so hopefully at some point we'll have you on for the other topics as well, but particularly because you have that occupational therapist background as well as being an ADHDer, and so I think that's, yeah, it's nice, uniquely positioned to cover this topic with us. So the question we always ask is, when did you discover you were neurodivergent? So when did you discover you were ADHD?
So the ADHD official diagnosis was when I was 39, so only a couple of years ago. I've known I was different my whole life. When I got to my mid-20s and my occupational therapy colleagues were on sensory processing courses and had to do assessments, they came back in going, Sarah, you'd make a great case study for us. And at that point, through doing the weird little experiments on me, I found out I was dyspraxic. So I knew I was dyspraxic from my mid-20s. And then about 4 years ago, I was being trained up in ADHD assessments, and I was going through the assessment to a psychologist. And my immediate words on seeing the assessment was, that's not a disability, that's my baseline. And then I went, oh, hang on a moment. And then over about a year, I started unpicking this concept of what was disabling about some of these features we've been talking about. So it's been really the last 5 years that I've understood my experience of ADHD and kind of attached that label to it.
And I like it because, yeah, you've come in from this, like say, occupational therapist perspective, and well, what is disabled about my situation? And I think it's fair to say for you, it's very much the way many of us in the autistic community might refer to that social model of disability. So disabled more in certain circumstances than others. Is that fair?
That's fair. I'm also very aware that I've got a lot of privilege in terms of the resource available to me, the relationships I've got around me. So there's a lot of scaffolding in place, which means that a huge amount of the time I could run about being very neurodivergent and be quite freeing in that. So I don't have some of the barriers that a lot of us do have. So I'm very aware of that, but I'm also very aware of, oh yes, there is some significant stresses and environments not being kitted out for the way that we think, the way we do things.
And we've been talking and trying to talk about that a lot more actually on Aucademy. So the last session that we did with Kieran Rose and Amy Pearson, because actually Kieran is also on the National Autism Training Programme, and so we've all really hammering home the point of intersectionality. So what you're just describing. So many of us as autistic people, as white autistic people, may be disabled in certain settings, in many settings, because of the setting not being suitable for an autistic or an ADHD experience of the world. But it's not the same oppression and discrimination and difficulty and barriers that, say, a black autistic or a black ADHD will have, and taking into account gender differences, all these sorts of things. So yeah, you can tell that we're really big on this, because we want to remember that our experiences are unique to us as individuals, but also what barriers are actually being put up for multiple types of people in our society. Very briefly, because you mentioned that you also recognised that you were dyspraxic, and I know that the terminology has slightly changed. So just very briefly, what is dyspraxic and dyspraxia?
So dyspraxia, also known as developmental coordination disorder. I don't particularly like that term. There's apraxia as well. Basically, praxis means action, and I identify as dyspraxic, and for me it is my motor planning is hard work, that I'm heavy-handed, I'm clumsy, my legs and arms aren't necessarily doing what I sometimes want them to be doing. So in answer to the question, dyspraxia is kind of, from the terminology I use, is around a challenge and difference in how I'm moving my body and coordinating myself. So awful handwriting. I'm really grateful we're now in a world where we can type. Typing is a lot easier for me, and can't catch a ball. Doesn't matter how many times you try. So
yeah, so that difficulty of
yeah,
motor movement, motor coordination.
And I also want to make a note that dyspraxia can be very different as well, because it quite often gets overlooked. If someone's apraxic, that tends to mean that that person doesn't do a particular thing at all in some settings, and a lot of people overlook verbal dyspraxia. So that's around all that coordination of managing a mouth. Mouth is a really complicated thing to manage, to eat, talk, swallow. Those are really difficult things. So dyspraxia for everyone is going to look very different.
And that's actually quite interesting. I was talking to Steve this morning, I think, about he describes like him having a lazy mouth, and that because we were talking about a project we want to do, and he was just a bit worried about he's going to have to concentrate not to have lazy mouth when he's trying to explain things to people. And so, yeah, like I say, it is a lot of energy and a lot of work to make our mouths do what we need to do. And because it makes me think of Gregory Tino that we've had on, who experiences apraxia. And so he has a difficulty with fine motor movements, so really small movements, like really, what would you call it, specific movements. And he struggles to use mouth words that are actually what he wants to say. So his mouth words don't actually meet or match up with what he wants to say. So he's better off with a letterboard, which, so it's just different ways of moving, that might create or might be challenged by certain things. Lovely, thank you. So why are we covering the topic of exercise and being neurodivergent?
So if you think of pretty much every public health message out there, we get this ongoing narrative around exercise being good for you. You know, we're in a society where we're quite often sedentary. We're sitting in chairs and computers all day, and we're constantly seeing in the news, in different reports, but exercise is brilliant for mental health. Exercise is one of the most protective factors in reducing the risk of heart conditions, possibly dementia, diabetes. There's a whole host of things we're being told to do for our own health. And whilst exercise does do all those things, actually the narrative that we should be doing it becomes a barrier in itself, particularly when neurodivergent, and there's huge kind of differences in what might be effective, what might be helpful. And because we're kind of going on this mainstream message of what's good for us, we can end up in a situation where we might be missing out on opportunities to manage our health, because the way it's presented in the press, the way it's presented by our friends, the way it's been presented to us in school hasn't been in a way that we can understand, in a way that we can follow, in a way that we can engage in. So I'm always really mindful when I come in as someone as an occupational therapist and a personal trainer that on the surface looks like I've got a very good routine around exercise, what that could be like for the person on the receiving end of it, because I was not that person 10, 15 years ago that could exercise, liked exercise, valued exercise. I was a health professional that knew that Public Health England said we should exercise and we should encourage our clients and patients to exercise. But I wasn't living that. I wasn't embodying that. I was the last person to get picked in PE. I am sure I am not alone in having that experience of sitting there kind of at the end of the queue, knowing no one is going to say your name. You kind of waiting for that kind of, oh, I'm with this group of people doing this sport, because they had no choice but to say my name because I was the last person there. So I'm really aware of our early experiences of being in our body, and moving can really define some of our health outcomes later in life, because that experience of not being able to catch a ball, being the last to be picked, and socially what that means when you're in school. The fact that being dyspraxic means I'm going to get injuries, I'm going to get bruised, I'm going to hurt myself. There's lots of negative feedback there as to why I can't do exercise. And that meant for a very long time I wasn't accessing something that actually improves my life. And once I realized that, like I do with pretty much anything I have an idea around, I was like, well, there's going to be other people out there that are struggling with this too. And that's why we're kind of talking about it today, because we know what the health outcomes are. You've heard around us not moving our bodies, but no one's talking about why we're not moving our bodies. And that's what I want to do, is kind of come in and let's start to unpick and think about how we can enjoy being in our bodies, because they're the only ones we've got. And before we started this recording, and I messaged you going, oh, can we talk about exercise? Because I want to talk about C-squirts. And you went, don't you? C-squirts? C-squats? What are you talking about, Sarah? And C-squirts are these little creatures. They are filter feeders. They live in the sea. They're very primordial, quite basic in their structure. And they are fascinating for me, because when they are born, they're like a little tadpole thing. A biologist will probably correct me on this. And they've got a really kind of rudimental brain. It's like a cerebral ganglion, and they've got a spinal cord. Now, brains take a huge amount of resource. I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but a huge amount of what we eat and we fuel in our bodies goes towards us powering our brains. These little C-squirts have a brain, and they use it to get to a place that's resource rich. So a nice rock, it might be surrounded by other C-squirts that are, so they can kind of chill out with their gang. They find a nice spot that's got all the resources so they can sit there and filter feed. The moment they found that really nice, suitable environment, they start to change. And one of the things they do is they absorb the nutrients from their own brain. They're basically eating their brain. The brain no longer serves a purpose. So we tend to think of our bodies as something that's there to carry our brain about. C-squirts are showing us that actually our brains are there to direct our bodies. That's what they're doing, is that these little C-squirts are going, oh, we don't need that bit anymore. Bing, and it's gone. So there's something really special about movement that we can learn from these guys. And that's what I'm kind of here to talk about.
I just like the name as well. Like, they sound so cute until like, and they eat their own brain. Like weird little cannibalistic zombies or something. But I know what you mean. They're not actually, they're just reabsorbing the energy and the nutrients and things. I made a note as well, because what you're saying is around that narrative around, you know, what we are being told all the time about exercise, and there's, you know, lots of body shaming, there's lots of barriers, and we're going to talk about those barriers and different neurodivergent types and the different types of barriers that might be experienced, that might be slightly different if you're autistic versus if you're say, I've made a note about PDA, you know, so if you've got that persistent drive for autonomy and there's a demand to exercise, you know, placed on you, I can see that's going to be really difficult for people. But that narrative as well, I don't know if I see it much anymore because of the types of media I look at, maybe, but it does just tell you to do exercise, doesn't it? It doesn't necessarily give you any real strategies or anything around when you struggle to exercise, like what you could do.
Yeah, and even if you think how many of us neurodivergent folk our mental health's affected, you go to the doctor to talk about your mental health, and the general advice is go for a walk, go for a run, go do yoga. And on a more extreme end of that, if you ring, say, a crisis team up and you're struggling, the advice will be go for a walk, go do some stretches, go have a bath. Those things are all assuming that you're feeling safe enough in your body to move it, and you've got the resource to know how to move it in a way that's going to work for you, not about
and also
them.
Not recognizing as well that, because, and I'm quite happy to talk about it publicly, I've had these conversations with Sarah a number of times, which is that I do have a lot of energy issues, and they excitingly, my GP has mentioned something that nobody's mentioned in 2 decades, and I'm quite excited that they're going to look into something else. But it is that frustration, and I've come out of GP appointments in tears because I'm saying I've got really low energy. I know I need to move my body. I don't need to be shamed for knowing that I need to move my body, but feeling like I can't, and there's barriers to being able to do that. And so, like you say, being given that advice, which sounds to a lot of people like it's really simple. So that thing of just stop walking around the block, just round a couple of roads. People feel that that's not much. That's not anything. That's not real exercise anyway. But for a lot of us, there's multiple reasons why that's huge. You know, the actual leaving of the house, all the steps it takes. For me, it's that knowing when I do that, I'll come back and I'll probably need to sleep, right? So then you have to prioritize, well, but I need to work because I need to make money because I need to pay my rent. So there's so many things, and we're getting these messages and then feeling shamed by those messages.
And I'm really mindful, we're both sitting here in relatively small bodies, both of us. I've been in a lot, my body has been larger. The impact of shame in a larger body in terms of the response from other people and the rules about what exercise can you do, what clothes can you wear, you know, there's layers of disability, there's layers of discrimination. And if we think of that intersectionality again, being in a larger body, being fat does not equate to having poor health. Being fat does not equate to not exercising, but we get these narratives the whole time. So I think one of the things you touched on was, you know, people's assumptions that it should be easy. And one of the strategies I always say is, let's stop saying it's just a walk, and let's stop saying it should be easy. We actually want to give ourselves permission to get curious about what we as an individual is finding hard, because your challenges are going to be different to my challenges. That's going to be different to someone else's. So get curious about what your own things are that are hard. What are the things that are working for you that you need to keep the same? What are the things where you need additional information? What are the things where it's about building a skill? What are the things where you're actually going, actually, that isn't something I enjoy or is in my skill set and I'm going to have to leave? But we need to kind of recognize that we do kind of get used to saying, oh, this is just a walk, this should be easy. We need to kind of stop that straight away, or at least notice when we're doing it and get more curious about why it isn't for us, because it isn't easy.
And it does make you feel really bad when you try those things, and then you're like, I'm just too exhausted now to do anything else. And yeah, okay. So why do some of us struggle to exercise and or be active? And when I say some of us, we're going to kind of now talk about different neurodivergent experiences. And obviously you might be, as a person, multiply neurodivergent. Kind of envious of my friend Annette, who's autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxic, ADHD, and they don't think in pictures. So now I'm thinking about like mindfulness and meditation is quite hard for people who don't think in pictures, and people who do. But they've made it part of a really important routine for them to exercise because they know how it works for them. They're also hypermobile. They've got like upside down elbows and all these kinds of things. So, but that's taken them a long time. I think they're in very early 50s now, and that's taken them a long time to get that to that stage. So just recognizing some people might be multiply neurodivergent, but yeah, so what are the struggles to exercising or being active if, for instance, you're ADHD, autistic, or dyspraxic?
Yeah. So there's going to be some common overlap, but for the unique differences, because there are unique challenges for each of those. For autistic folk, there's the things I hear again and again from my friends, from my clients. It's twofold. One is the experience of sport at school. That has become traumatic, that every time you've moved your body, you've associated it with a really difficult social situation. And I'm not saying that's for all autistic people, because some autistic people absolutely thrive on the rules of sport and absolutely love it and enjoy it. But for a lot of people, because there's so many social elements around exercise and activity when it's presented to you at an early age, that social element and any bullying that's being experienced, any shame that becomes embedded, that's a huge factor. The other factor around it is because of that early experience, there's then no motivation to embed it into a routine. Why would you want to have that as part of your day? So it makes it very hard to explore other options because we don't know those options are there. So there's a lack of information around, well, what exercise can I do that I would enjoy? And then the most kind of biggest one at all is most people, neurodivergent or not, walking into a gym or walking into a sports ground or walking into anywhere, if you're not someone that exercises, is intimidating. The moment we've got that autistic need for familiarity, for the predictability, to understand what the sensory environment is like, the messy, noisy places, they're visually busy, there's sounds, they can be big, tall, echoey, they're unpredictable, there's very little information about, well, what's the order in which I go in, what's it look like, where are the changing rooms, the sensory experience of getting changed, all those aspects become a barrier to being able to just go to the gym. They can become a barrier to going out running because the sensory experience of getting changed, going out into, I'm going to use the phrase I've heard you use a lot of times, nature doesn't consent to touch you. That idea of going out into the unpredictable, where there's a whole load of sensory experiences, is very difficult. So for someone who's an autistic profile, that kind of unfamiliarity, the lack of predictability, they are usually the biggest barriers once we've kind of unpicked the stuff around early experience of socializing. So that's your autistic experience. Because I was aware of my dyspraxia a lot longer than my other kind of traits of neurodivergence, the dyspraxia barriers I've touched on already, that moving your body hurts because it bangs into things and it bruises. And I've got a whole history of broken limbs because walking down the stairs is challenging enough, let alone navigating you want me to do what with what body part? And the amount of times I've seen people kind of walk into a group exercise setting, the instructors made no effort to describe to the new person what they're doing, and then suddenly this room of 30 people all start moving in unison. For that person that's new, going, I put what on where and do what. I've seen people walk out of classes because they've just felt so ashamed that they don't know where they're moving, how they're moving. So a barrier for a dyspraxic person is the repetition of understanding the movement. Can take longer, it can be harder, it might need different prompts, and if those prompts aren't given in a supportive way, you can feel really ashamed, you can feel quite infantilized, that why am I not getting this simple thing right? So the barriers around dyspraxia are usually around allowing yourself to be bad at it, allowing yourself to find it hard. Interestingly, Dyspraxia Foundation in the UK did a survey last year with I think there was about 600 respondents, and the exercise the majority of the respondents do involves us having our own space. We like a mat and a clearly defined space, and we're doing our own thing, and we're not having to keep up with everyone else. So it tended to be a low, like Pilates or yoga or an exercise session with weights, but we've got a defined area and we don't have to keep up with anyone. So there's things that we know can work well from the dyspraxic kind of perception, but like I said, the injury tends to be a barrier. And then for ADHD, I was
just going to give an anecdote, if that's all right, before we do ADHD specifically, because that's going to be a thing of its own as well. Because there's a number of things as you were talking. So I've been shamed in a Pilates class that I was sent to because of my back issues by my physiotherapist. And a lot of us have this as autistic people, what's known as poor muscle tone, right? It's even in the checklist, or one of those checklists that you can see online. And I really, really struggle with my upper arm strength. My legs are quite strong, but my arms are like really weak. And it wasn't really Pilates. She was trying to get us to do like push-ups. And I'm like, this is not Pilates. I've done Pilates before. So anyway, I couldn't do it. So I just sat to wait for the next instruction. And she came over wearing a mic, and in front of the whole room of people was like, why have you stopped? And I said, oh, my muscles are really, my upper arms are quite weak. And she just mocked me in front of the whole class. And I was, sort of confident enough, which not all of us are, to leave and then complain and say, I came here because I need to exercise. I don't need to be shamed on a mic in front of everybody. I was doing my best, and I made a complaint because I was like, that's not on. But there'll be lots of people who have those experiences and then never go back.
And also,
I mean, I didn't go back to there.
I was about to say, but you didn't go back.
Not to there.
But immediately we've got barriers put up because we know these things happen. Your story is not unique, sadly. Most people who are listening to this who have tried to do exercise will have some sort of similar situation that they've experienced where someone has made them feel ashamed about them engaging in the way that they can. And what could have been very different is because actually our muscles are tiny compared to leg muscles. Our muscles are tiny. We are naturally weaker in our upper bodies. What we need to do as an instructor is to have gone, okay, here's a press up. For those of you that aren't at this stage, and actually a good instructor will tend to start at they grade it and start with an option that everyone in the room can do, and then work their way up so you're not being told, oh, you've got the remedial exercise. You're being told, here's the first exercise, right, and here's your other options, so that people can grade, and it's a sense of success as you've graded up to the point where your arms feel strong enough to do, for example, that full push-up. And those things shouldn't happen. Instructors are given the skills when they're qualifying on how to coach, to engage people and motivate people. And it's unfortunate that we're still in a situation where people don't get it.
I think some of it was also just ableism, because at the time I was relatively young. I was probably early 30s, maybe, might have been 30. That person probably looked at me and thought, you should be able to do this, without recognizing we all might, a lot of us might have, you know, invisible disabilities, things that you can't see. And I think it was because there were a lot of people who were older than me, some of them 50s, 60s, doing it relatively comfortably, relatively easily. And I think there was some of that as well. So that ageism, ableism, not recognizing that not everyone can do these things. So yeah, it really stuck in my mind. And I'd like to say, at least I felt confident enough to complain and try and find somewhere else. But some people might never try again, because they're like, well, I don't want to do that and have that experience. I've got a couple of other things as you were talking I thought was really interesting, because coordination difficulties. So when I was I had my university gym, I didn't really go to the gym. I think I tried it a couple of times, but it's that, like you said, it's that thing of not knowing how to use the machine, not necessarily knowing how to use your body with those machines and exercises, feeling uncomfortable, maybe asking for that support. So maybe Ben, our Aucademy elf, is saying exposure anxiety for him stops him from going to any public classes. Even one-to-one scares him because he's being seen as vulnerable, sweaty or weak. And so, you know, we might not even feel confident enough to ask the people who are there to, usually they're quite kind actually in some gyms, like kind people who want to come and help you learn how to use your body and the machinery. So I used to go to classes, and I used to like legs, bums and tums. So that one I could do, because it wasn't, you know, it was legs, it was bums. It was the thing where I felt like I had more strength and ability, and I felt exercised at the end. But there were two classes run by two different people. I liked one of the classes and the other one I didn't. The one class that I did like, she was really understanding when I said, can we not have the flashing colourful lights? Can you please turn the disco music down? Again, because I had that ability, I felt confident enough to say that. Not everyone can feel comfortable or safe to do those things. So I would ask that, and she would recognise that, yeah, we don't have the music loud, we don't have the flashing lights. And they were just very good, clear movements and instructions. It wasn't dancey. The other class didn't really pay attention to my needs when it came to the music and the lights, and it was too dancey. It was too much choreography, and I would get lost. And then I would feel frustrated, because then I'm trying to catch up, like, well, what we're doing now, we've had to turn around and I'm completely lost. And what she said left, I've gone right, you know, all this kind of thing. And at the end, I didn't feel like I'd done any exercise. So just having somebody just be very clear and just do very straightforward movements that made you feel I've done a workout was much better for me.
I also want to pick up on something you said there, which is around feeling like you've done exercise, because we have a perception around what exercise is, and some people will go, I don't want to do exercise because I don't like how it feels to have done exercise, because the body could be achy, the body could be tired. It might not even be clear what the body is saying. It's just feeling, you know, there's a whole host of things around what does it mean to do exercise. When we think about exercise for health benefits, we're talking about heart rate being slightly elevated, but you're still being able to talk. And when Public Health England says you need 150 minutes of those a week, it's talking about being just slight increase in heart rate. So if you've got a sense of your heart rate, that's and you use mouth words, that's really easy to get a sense of. If we've got interoceptive differences, we might not pick up on those. We might find those sensations overwhelming. If we're someone that has, like with my dyspraxia, I've got praxis differences, I tend to need a lot more input to notice. So I'll need to feel like I've done a workout in terms of that achy bones, sweaty, but actually I could get the same health benefits doing a lot less. But from my sensory needs, I need more to be able to kind of recognize I'm at that point. So doing exercise and the level of effort is going to vary. It's okay to, there's workouts that I've done which wouldn't get me into a sweat because the significant rest periods, but they're meeting a particular goal around strength, and they elevate my heart rate very briefly and bring it back down, elevate it and bring it back down. So each person's going to have a unique kind of profile of what's going to work for them. And we need to kind of get rid of the idea of, for everyone, a workout involves having sore muscles or whatever that might mean.
And I think that's actually quite just a helpful thing, and kind of just is kinder to everybody, who, because I would potentially think, I'm supposed to feel knackered, sore, this idea of exercise. But I think having that explained, that it feels like a much, I'm not going to say smaller goal or simpler goal, because that would not be the case for everybody. But for some people, maybe a more manageable or kinder goal for themselves is, no, you're not expected to do X amount of this activity, or you're not meant to be sore at the end necessarily. We're not talking about making you really muscly. We just want your heart rate elevated somewhat. And that could be all sorts of activities that maybe aren't going to feel as scary or as difficult for some of us. Okay, I like that. Can I just get you to just explain interoception?
Of course. Word. So interoception is the awareness of our body signals. So it's anything that's going on internally. So it's the, do I feel hungry? Do I feel thirsty? Do I need the toilet? Am I hot? Am I cold? Is my heartbeat going? Do I feel flushed? There's lots of different interoceptive experiences, but it's basically, our interoception is our body's kind of baseline function, and our brains translating what that means.
Lovely. I just want to hopefully, just in case you haven't heard that word. So like I say, if you maybe have, and there's no judgment on this, but if you have slightly less or more limited interoception, so not, I always pronounce it incorrectly, but have that difficulty recognizing that your heart rate is increasing and things like that. So you might not be able to tell quite as easily. So, maybe Fitbit watches and
and I think sometimes we think of interoception as getting not enough or getting too much, and actually there's what we call discrimination difficulties, which is being able to tell the difference between the different signals, because we're kind of taking in so much information from our external world, what's going on around us, and our internal world of what's going on in our bodies. Being able to define the difference of, this thing that I feel here is my heart beating, and this thing next to me is my temperature being raised. There's so many different signals happening at the same time. Sometimes it's not about it being too much or too little. It's about just knowing where it's coming from and what that particular quality of it is.
Oh, lovely. Hopefully that's helped people as well understand that a little bit better. And I think that's all my notes. So I had, about the room full of people. So, and Ben said this as well, but prefer to exercise alone. For me, when I've had the ability and the energy to do it, I don't mind doing it with people per se. But like you say, I'm probably up the back in the corner, because then I can just focus on myself more than, is everyone watching me and making a mistake because I'm making a mistake, with the steps of the class or whatever it might be. And potentially doing it like maybe one-to-one with a trainer who's quite kind, that I'm fine with, but not everyone's going to be comfortable doing that. So Ben said that one-to-one also scares him as well, because that idea of being vulnerable and sweaty, and this idea of being weak. I'm assuming, Ben, when you say weak, you maybe mean really struggling to do the exercises. Physically, yeah. So feeling physically like, yeah. Okay.
What I will say from my personal training background is people assume you need to be fit to get a personal trainer. You know, you tend to think of it as an assumption of this is what athletes do. There are personal trainers that specialize in that end. A huge amount of what personal trainers do is around that nurturing you to get strong, to feel strong, if that's your goal. I also have people who don't want to be strong. They just want to kind of get a little kind of repertoire of exercises together so that they're doing something. But it's around having someone there that can guide you through it. And one-to-one can be very intimidating. There's a huge amount out there on the internet, but sometimes that can be unhelpful, particularly around diet culture. There's lots of kind of egos and unhealthy messages, but it's very easy that if you want to kind of, for example, learn how to do a press up, you could Google how do I do a press up, and there will be instructions there. But the added benefit of if you're in a position where you can get one-to-one support is that person's there to be able to give prompts for you that work for you, to build up your confidence, to build up your skill, and to build up
make sure that, yeah, based on your own body. And again, if you've got other disabilities, if you have bendy, you know, joints, and things like this, then that person might be able to support you to say, if you do this, this will make it easier, or you'll be able to do this in a better way for you and things. So yeah, it's all well and good, like you say, lots and lots of free videos of people doing things, but they don't have the same body as us a lot of the time. Just the last couple of things, actually, while we're still talking about autistic, although some of this will feed into the ADHD experience as well, is that difficulty starting, stopping and switching tasks.
That's what I was going to bring in for the ADHD.
Okay, we'll come back to that one then. No worries. And the last thing, just around the sensory, because there's so many things, isn't there, when it comes to sensory that might be quite difficult when it comes to exercising. So Ben talks about really not liking that feeling of feeling sweaty. And that makes him feel he just doesn't like that sensation. So like, when do we exercise then? Because I don't want to be sweaty when I have to go and do this other thing. So trying to work out, and you've mentioned like, well, then it's executive functioning difficulties, maybe around planning, when do I do this? And we mentioned before we came on, I think breathing is really uncomfortable.
Yes.
So when I was younger and I did try to when I did try to run, I was trying to do the Couch to 5K, and I kind of liked that app because, it said just run for 1 minute, which is actually really long.
That's long. It's so long.
But then it was like walk now for like 3 minutes. I was like, good, lovely. But the running part, I really struggle with, particularly outdoors, because the breathing that you potentially have to do, and particularly if you're not used to breathing while running, I know that sounds strange maybe for some people, but you want to breathe in a way that suits the running, right? It hurts. It's a really horrible sensation. And then that's all I can think about. And I'm probably also thinking, well, my nose is running now. And, there's all these things. You're not able, for some of us, to get hyper focused into the...
Or also, if you've ever experienced an anxiety attack or panic attack, the moment that breath starts to feel that little bit extra elevated, the association with it being, I can't cope, I'm going to panic. So the breath is really key here. When we're under any sort of pressure or stress, our body and brain does a lot of automatic things to help us manage the situation. So our heart rate increases. We start to try and breathe faster to get more air in. We're pumping blood around to get our oxygen around. The first thing you need to know is your body is doing what it's designed to do. So actually recognizing that this isn't that you're not fit enough. This isn't that you can't cope. This is your body doing what it's made to do because it's getting the oxygen where it needs to go. That's the first thing to remember. Second thing is you can slow it down. It doesn't need to be running at that pace. It could feel like walking, but you're being a bit more bouncy with it. You can change the pace. You're the one that's in control of how fast your body moves or doesn't move. So you can change the pace. You can pause, rest. And the third one, my ADHD brain has just forgotten, but I'm going to come back to, oh, yeah, I think this was it. I constantly get asked what's the best exercise. And I've got a brilliant autistic friend who's an osteopath, and I was chatting to them about this as well, and their answer was whatever you enjoy, because whatever you enjoy is what you stick to. And I've stolen that from them. I was like, yes, you're absolutely right. There's different things you could do for different goals, for different function, but fundamentally, if going out and running, you can't think of anything worse. You don't have to run then. There are so many other ways we can move your body in a way that's enjoyable. Let's not go for that one. What I would say about running, because I hate running, I'm dyspraxic, coordinating arms and legs at the same time way too much. I do get a sense of achievement though when I notice I can go a little bit further. It gives me that ADHD dopamine hit of, oh, that feels good. But the actual running part's challenging. I do better at it when I'm on a cross trainer, because I don't have to think about what my arms and legs are doing, because a cross trainer is this piece of equipment where I'm just trying to work out in the camera. This is my dyspraxic moment going. So your arms and legs are both going like that in opposite directions. They can be intimidating bits of equipment to stand on. But actually, for me as a dyspraxic person, because I've got the feedback of the machine there, and I've got one less thing to think about. So that then helps me regulate my breath. And then the final thing is, when we're stressed, we tend to hold our breath. The most powerful thing you can do is exhale out. When you're experiencing effort, slowly breathe out. And that exhale will lower your blood pressure. It will remind you to inhale as well, because once we've expelled all the air from our body automatically remembers to breathe in. We don't need to really remember to breathe back in. So if you ever find yourself struggling with your breath, focus on breathing out. The rest of it will happen much more naturally.
This is very useful stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Lovely. Okay, so now ADHD. Why do ADHD potentially struggle with exercise?
All the things you've just kind of touched on around the kind of autism questions around, I've got to go and do a thing that isn't in my immediate environment right now, but there's a shiny thing over here that's much more exciting. I could be sitting talking to Chloe. Why the executive functioning of doing those 20 steps to get out is really difficult. Also, that kind of monotropic kind of being able to stick with one thing. Exercise in the traditional sense can be boring. It might involve, I tried following an exercise plan called Big But Boring. I should have known that wasn't the exercise plan for me, because it involved doing the same 3 exercises for about an hour every day. And I wasn't going to stick to that. It was boring. So there's the executive functioning of getting out. For that, I say, make it easy. So for when I'd impulsively, I think sometimes ADHDers have a slight advantage in that we've got this desire to be moving, usually, not always, but there's usually a desire that I feel like I've got energy, I feel restless. So I kind of use that impulsiveness to make it happen. But I try and make it easy. So if I want, at the phase where I was going for running because I'd impulsively signed up for a marathon, don't ever do that. Don't let your impulsivity go, oh, you've never run before, let's sign up for a running competition. That was silly of me. because I was then committed to doing this thing, I started leaving my gym stuff and my trainers on the toilet seat when I went to bed at night, because that meant when I got up, the act of moving those things off the toilet seat meant it was just as easy to put them on my feet because they were there. If they'd stayed hidden in the cupboard, I'd have never have got them. I do some circus skills stuff. So I do this thing called poi, and I've been really missing doing it. And one of the reasons I haven't been doing it is these were locked in a cupboard outside. That's way too many steps for me to go get them. So the last time I was in that particular outdoor box, I went, right, I'm going to take these inside and I'm going to leave them visually out so that I can see them. So I need the visual prompt of there's the thing you want to do. There's the calendar reminder. I need to make it as easy for myself to initiate in the first place. That's the first thing, that actually going and doing it. The second thing for ADHD is, particularly in a group exercise or a personal training environment, is paying attention to the instruction. Really hard to do. So finding an exercise that either has less instructions or there's a visual. There's been a few different ones where like the instructors will use like a sign language to indicate what's next, or there's a rhythm. That's really helpful for managing it. I've got these packs of exercise cards so that first of all, it reminds me what exercise I'm doing because I've just got the card right in front of me. Also, because I can plan a very good workout, but I'm not going to stick to that myself. I can just kind of quickly flick through this pack and go, aha, that's the next one I want to do. And I'll have it there as a visual of this is the next thing. So anything to help that executive function will make it easier. So I have clients that I give a lot of instructions at once, but I've got clients where I'm like, I'm going to use these cards so that it prompts me to break down this instruction. So it's one at a time, that I'm keeping things focused in on this one thing. And when it gets boring, I'll mix it up before it gets boring. So for ADHDs, we need to make it interesting and we need to make it easier to kind of follow steps. But I'd say the biggest thing is I've given myself permission to not have a plan anymore, because if I have a plan, I don't stick to it. And I think that's the same with a lot of kind of anyone who's got that kind of PDA profile of that drive for autonomy. Choose your own plan. You don't need to stick to someone else's. Use that autonomy to kind of be intuitive in the moment around what you want and what you'd like to do.
And it must be quite difficult as well, because just the act of telling yourself, I want to, or I need to exercise, if that person's not in a regulated place for that, persistent drive for autonomy sort of experience, that itself is a demand on them to, well, I've made the demand on myself to exercise. So I don't have any advice around that. I don't consider myself to have that sort of PDA profile. But I think there'll be people like Tigger Pritchard and Jodie Izzett and Chrissy Forbes who maybe have some ideas around how to do that if you're the one obviously wanting to do the exercise, not expecting a PDA to exercise, because that would just create demand anyway. And I just wanted to add, my little anecdote, which was to, like you say, to make things easier and also to just be kinder to yourself, which is like last year when my back was particularly bad. It's pretty much always bad, but when my back was particularly bad and my osteopath was, and she's really lovely. She knows I really struggle to exercise, so she tries not to make me feel shamed or anything. She just gently says, if you can, try and go for a walk and things like that. But I was still finding that really hard, because once you're indoors and you're in your safe space and you're able to regulate more easily, or I certainly am. And like I say, I really struggle with nature, like I say, because right now it's raining. Like, I can't think of anything worse, because it touches you without consent and it's really aversive to me. So what I was doing was, say I'd gone somewhere in the car, say I'd gone to the shops, I'd parked my car, which isn't, we don't have a drive, so it's across the road, And as I'd be walking to my front door, before I get there, I'd go, I'm out here already. I could just walk around the block. And I would do that. And that was, I found that because I was like, well, I'm already here. I don't need anything. I'm wearing, what I'm wearing is fine. I'm not going to get sweaty. I'm just going to walk around the block. And kind of doing that was helpful for me.
And that's how I actually ended up kind of getting into exercises when I experienced a period of depression following a bereavement, and I'm a mental health professional that knows what I should be doing. I was Velcro to the couch, that kind of depression where you can't get off the couch. And I knew exercise was good for me. I didn't know what that was because I'd never had a lived experience of feeling it being energizing. All I knew was I was tired, my body was in pain. I don't even have the words of I was feeling low. It was just fatigue. That's what I was experiencing. And one day I gave myself permission to go to the front door and I'd say get rid of the word just, but it comes very naturally. But I was like, go to the front door, open it, experience the outside world. And the next time I was like, well, do that. And if you feel able to, but you don't have to, the next thing will be to go to the end of the road. And at the end of the road, there's a post box, and it's completely socially acceptable to walk to a post box and then turn right back around. So my routine for a few days became, not every day, because not every day I was able to do it, just walk to the post box. And then that walk into the post box got easier. It cleared my head a little. So I'd walk a little bit further. Then I was walking to the shop, and then because I didn't have anything to buy one day, I walked past the shop. And then eventually I was walking to a point where I'd gone past the shop and I was walking past the gym. And I thought, well, I'm off sick. I've got nothing else to do. Why don't I walk in and see what it looks like? I gave myself permission I don't need to sign up to anything. Let's just walk in and see what it is. And that was the start of it going from I can't get off the couch to there's some benefits of me walking from a sensory perspective. It was meeting my sensory needs at that point to, and now I've got this extra resource of I can get to a gym. And the first probably 5 months I was at the gym, there was probably only 2 things I did at the gym because I didn't know what else to do, but it slowly built over time till I got a very big repertoire.
And I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that nobody's goal has to be, like you say, it doesn't have to be the gym. It could be just build, I say again, trying not to use the word just, but building up that, just stepping outside. And that might be, you do that several times for a few weeks. And, maybe then it's, like I say, going to the post box and back again. And that you just, again, I can't stop saying the word just, but everyone please recognise we don't mean it's simple or easy. But doing that and not necessarily feeling like you have to have a goal really, or have a goal to go to a gym, that might be a lot for somebody, and is good if they feel that they're able to accomplish and manage that. And also that it's okay to relapse in quotation marks, like, having a month where you really can't do the things.
It's not relapse. That's the thing to kind of take into account. Well, the biggest strategies is going, that's not accessible to me right now. And it's okay for that to not be accessible. The other thing is I'm very aware I'm talking in the context of gym, because in terms of movement, the things that I found work for me are my circus skills, going to the allotment, going to the gym, and walking with my headphones on. So they're the things that are in my repertoire. I've got amazing clients that go outdoor swimming in the cold water. I can't swim. I don't like the cold. That is never going to be something that I can talk about with a passion. So when I talk in a passion about kind of going to the gym, that's because that's my experience. There will be something around moving, and we don't even need to leave in the space you're in, regardless of your disability, being in your body. There are ways that we can engage with our body to move it. regardless of what that disability is. And it's just exploring what those things are for you and what will work.
Will that be when we come on to strategies?
Yeah, let's come on to strategies.
Okay, so just the last thing I want to say then that we flagged before we came on, for possible things that might be a struggle for us to do, or feel that we're able to do exercise or activity, because we've got this idea about what that should be. And so we've obviously mentioned about a couple of key neurodivergent experiences, remembering that there's lots and that obviously they can intersect. You mentioned mental health, actually, you know, when we're not doing well psychologically, it can become a huge monumental, or feel like a huge monumental thing to do, which is to just get up out of a bed or off of a sofa. So there's other things other than, you know, innate neurodivergence, but also the other disabilities, because a lot of us are more likely to have other disabilities like chronic fatigue. So, you know, being that exhausted, like I said, I do have to weigh up, right, if I go for that walk, and actually what I've liked is me and my partner, we just talk. And so you don't think about the walk. And I like that. So and I need a reason to go out, right? I do need a reason. And so at one point, actually, I had, some people might do Pokemon Go. Brilliant, right? I had something that you collect coins or something as you went round. But me and my partner, we do just talk and go around. And I'm lucky, I live near the sea, so we come around the seafront. But sometimes I get halfway round and I'm like, I can barely pick up my feet. Like I'm completely out of energy already, and I might have to sit for a while and things like that. So I really have to think about, can I afford to do that, because I need to do work, I need to do these other things later. And that's a really difficult thing for me to have to consider and manage, because you also know that it's good for your body to move. So there's those sorts of disabilities. Also, I've mentioned I've got back pain. You want to say something? I've got my notes, so you can come back. What do you want to say about what I just said?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on, we experience fatigue and pain for a whole lot of reasons, and sometimes we don't move because of the fear of causing more pain, causing more fatigue. That fear is often the driving force for, I'm not saying that's the case in your case, but I think it's really important that I say this. The fear is often the factor that causes the fatigue, and it causes the pain. So it's okay to experiment with where your kind of level of discomfort is, because some things will energize. With the ADHD med shortage at the moment, I've got a lack of meds, and yesterday I hit my slump and it feels really fatiguing, and all I want to do is go into bed and sleep. And I have done that the last few weeks, and I suddenly realized, oh, hang on, before I had my ADHD meds, I get this experience, and I knew that if I did some movement for 60 seconds, that would give me a sense of, is my arousal level actually down, and I need to bring it up through exercise. So I'd do 60 seconds of something. I don't even need to leave the house. It could be pushing stuff about in a cupboard. It could be sitting and standing. It could be just skipping on the spot. It could be anything at all, but just doing a few seconds to explore, is my fatigue, I need to sleep, or is my fatigue, I need to move? And that can sometimes increase alertness, increase concentration, and give back. So one element to each person can explore with is, what is my fatigue telling me? What is my pain telling me? What other repertoire have I got? When you do have to pace, because if you are doing something now, it's going to stop you doing something later on. Give yourself permission to choose. Give yourself permission to make it short. Give yourself permission to make it one step less than what you think is enough. Give yourself permission to make it smaller than you're saying is enough, because you'll then get a sense of what's going to work.
And I think that is quite interesting, the idea of, am I tired? Like, am I mentally, I mean, we usually sleep for our brains. we can, our bodies recuperate from laying without necessarily being asleep. So if it's you're physically tired, as it were, like your body, you can rest, but we sleep for our brains. And so that's quite interesting, like trying to pick apart, is it that I'm exhausted, my brain is, which is sadly most of the case, is my brain's exhausted, and a lot of the time I haven't been sleeping in the afternoons quite as much as I have in other periods of my fatigue and exhaustion, but there will be times where I can't keep my eyes open, and it's like real, your brain has had enough, Chloe, and you have to have a sleep. But maybe there are other times, like say, where it's actually, if you did some activity,
and that first step of doing the activity is really hard. And yesterday reminded me of how hard it was. And it must have taken a year pre my ADHD meds to work out, oh, sometimes when I'm sleeping isn't the best strategy for me. It took a long time of playing with it. And now I've got a little repertoire of, oh, actually, I know what sensation I'm looking for, and it makes it much easier for me to tap into it. But even with all that knowledge, yesterday it was hard to remind myself of it. So it's about, you and I use the word curious a lot, but I really love it about being curious about your body. And if you don't do something differently, you'll never know if it's going to make you feel different. So just working out what those differences might be.
And because it was one of my notes, which you've already said, but yeah, fear of hurting yourself further than the existing disability or pain level that you have, or making your disability worse. That is definitely something that I am pretty much mindful of, my back and the pain that I'm in 24/7. And so things that I think to myself, I'd actually quite enjoy doing that. I used to love doing that. So like roller skating, and we've got, but the fear that if I fell, I know, and I mean, I know, that would be it for me for probably quite a long time. So it's about recognizing, like you say, what are the activities that I can do, that I can manage, that aren't necessarily going to spike that fear of, because otherwise I'm avoiding everything, because I'm thinking, well, I would have loved to have been able to do that, but it will just hurt if I fall, for example. And the one that you mentioned about, what if you're deaf?
Yes,
that was interesting.
So my sister is deaf. Yoga isn't accessible to her because she has to look, lip read, and follow what the person's doing. Therefore, if someone is giving a whole load of instructions and you've got your head between your legs, she's got no idea what's going on. And there'll be a whole host of other disabilities in which there's going to be an aspect of the environment that would need to change to make it accessible. And that's not to say that it can't be changed, but it's about that extra work of doing the research to find out who understands this, that's going to meet my needs. The same way, if you're hypermobile, going to yoga can sometimes be actually unhelpful, because you might be bending beyond and then experience pain, you might experience fatigue. So again, just finding ways of researching and contacting the places that might do the things that appeal, to ask a few key questions. The response will give you more than you need to know. If someone gives a really helpful response, you'll be like, yes. If someone doesn't reply or gives an unhelpful response, that gives you the information to go, that's not the place that's going to help me kind of get into this. So being able to make that kind of ask the questions around your specific needs can be useful if you know what those needs are.
So on to our final point then. So we've talked about, just to summarise for everybody, why we might struggle in terms of certain neurodivergent types and certain barriers that might exist in the environment and from other people to create difficulty exercising or engaging in activities. So now we're on to what sorts of strategies are there to address some of the challenges. And I think hopefully we've said a few little things as we've gone along, but this is more focusing on strategies.
So specific strategies, I've already touched on get curious about what you find hard, because if you know what the challenge is, it makes it so much easier to address. So that's the first thing. And that could be anything. It could be sensory overwhelm. It could be fat phobia from society. It could be your sensory needs. So, for example, everyone says yoga is really relaxing. I've got a really sensitive, what they call vestibular system. My sense of balance is incredibly sensitive. I feel car sick a lot of the time if I'm moving my head certain ways. So for yoga, if I tilt my head, that is very alerting and overwhelming for me. So yoga is great for me if I want to alert myself. It's not great for me if I want to relax. So we need to sometimes get rid of some of the narratives around what an exercise should be doing for us. So recognizing our own narratives, our own story, our own experience of what we think we can and can't do. Allow yourself to be a beginner is another top tip. Every beginner is going to experience failures. Every beginner is going to not know some information. So do the things to gather that information, to gather the information that you need, and to allow yourself to try it, and to allow yourself to find out you don't like something, or that you do like something. So give yourself that permission. There can be some challenges around not knowing what to wear or what equipment. So Googling, that can be helpful, or reaching out and asking someone if you know. Also knowing where to look. I think Ben's example of not feeling, I'm not strong enough. The moment you don't think you're fit enough, you don't think you're thin enough, you don't think you're sporty enough to start, you're never going to start. So maybe kind of recognizing if you've got some of those beliefs. For any challenges around coordination and balance, it actually sounds counterintuitive, but add more weight. So when we think of doing any exercise, we tend to do, let's just use our body first and make it quite light and easy in speech quotations, because we know it's not easy. When we've got balance difficulties, when we've got proprioceptive, so body awareness differences, increasing the weight can increase the force, which increases our feedback to our body. So it gives us more of a sense of where we are. So you can do things to help improve your balance by actually giving yourself more feedback and giving yourself more weight, or using a mirror to look at what you're doing. I don't like doing that. That doesn't help me because I'm a kind of visual side, but there's different ways of kind of getting more sensory information to help you feel, you know how to do things. Chloe, your ability to complain or express your needs, that will serve you. If other people have those abilities, use them, use the strengths that you have. But particularly if you are unfortunate enough to have a negative feedback from someone is unpleasant, remember that's a them thing, it's not a you thing. There are an amazing amount of people out there who do want to support people with exercise, that do want to support people with feeling safe in their bodies, with being able to move in a joyous way that you enjoy. So find the person or people or group or information that fits well for you, because it is out there, because there's amazing people out there. So there will be the right people. So if you do have a negative experience, just that can really taint your experience. But remember, there are some of us out there that aren't like that, and they will be more than thrilled to help you feel a sense of success. And like I say, break it down into small steps. And if you think, oh, that's that's small. Break it down smaller. You know, we always tend to overestimate what we should do, what we could do. So make it really simple. And again, when I say simple, I'm bringing it back to that idea of walking to the front door can be complicated. Therefore, that means we need to break it down even more. What are we doing from our chair, from our bed? There's lots of things we can do in those spaces. Break it down to one thing at a time. For the ADHDers out there, forgetting about it, not going back to it is not failure. Get practicing. If you found you've liked something or you want to find out if you like something, it's okay to forget about it for a while and then come back to it. That's absolutely okay. That is not failure. So that success of being able to go, I tried that and I want to try it again, is really important. So give yourself permission to find things hard. Give yourself permission for it to take longer to make the progress that you'd like. You know, these are all the things. And if you find yourself avoiding, bring it back to what your values are and what's important to you. Why are you avoiding it? Is it important for you to avoid it to keep it yourself safe? Or actually, is there something really important here in your values that's going to help you find the activity or the exercise that you like, and take that risk to experience discomfort in doing something that's really aligned with what's important to you? So they're the kind of main strategies I've got from a psychological perspective. From a physical perspective, I'd say use familiar movement first. If there's something that you do that feels familiar to you, so I won't have a clue where to start with rollerblading, but actually, if rollerblading is something you've done in the past and you've enjoyed, if you've still got a pair, putting them on. And you don't have to be out there in like really dramatic circumstances, but, you know, having that, oh, I'm just going to kind of wiggle my feet backwards and forwards on the rollerblades while standing very securely with a bar on either side of me. You've got that starting point there. So kind of embrace those things in your experience that you know that you like already.
Very rarely there might be like a song that plays or something, because I listen to music pretty much all the time, and particularly if I'm by myself, I'll just dance, and maybe I get a bit silly with the dance, and okay, it's probably only for the length of a song, maybe not even that, but you've still moved quite a bit to be kind of tired, like kind of out of breath at the end of it, and I kind of think, oh well, I did that was something.
I've had personal training sessions that I've delivered where what we've done is like 60 seconds of what we call disco. And we've literally, the hour has been mainly sitting still, not doing anything, but we've done 60 seconds of moving in a way that feels good. So, and again, I haven't talked about music. For some, music won't help, but actually predictable rhythm can be really useful for a lot of people. So having a music or a sound that appeals in the sensory level can really help get an activity in. And my final bit of advice is, don't think of it as exercise. We're playing with our bodies, we're moving our bodies. I can do just as much for my health doing something functional at my allotment or in my kitchen or sitting in this office chair as I can at a gym. So it's about finding those opportunities to increase your movement in the things you already do.
Lovely. Any final parts or points?
I can't think of any. Have you got any?
No, just making sure we've got all the lovely things and the strategies, and there weren't any final bits that you were hoping.
Let me see. I've talked about. Last one probably is, if you're in choice overwhelm, because like I've said, I've talked very generically and vaguely. And if you're in choice overwhelm, if there's something you've already done that you're thinking of now, that's the thing to choose first. If you're already thinking of something, choose that one. If you've got a few things, to be honest, it doesn't matter which one you choose. It really doesn't. So which one is the one that in the next week, the next 24 hours, you can do an action towards doing? If you can narrow that down, it gives you a clear idea of what to focus on, and you don't need to stick to it, but it gives you a starting point of going, right, this is what I'm going to do, and then you can reevaluate it as you've kind of start experiencing it or doing the things you need to do to start the activity. And if you don't know where to start at all, there's a very good, there's lots of resources on the internet, I think, but there's a website called Derby, which just has some very basic animations and pictures of people doing different exercise movements. And that's a nice one that if you're thinking of traditional like jumping jacks or squats, that's a nice one to go and look at the instruction as to how to do one of those exercises. So that's a nice
one. Put a link in the chat box, I can flag it on the screen for people. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just find it a nice, straightforward website. Oh, Dare and Bee, like Buzzy Bee. Okay,
Buzzy Bee.
Just make a nice little banner for everybody. I think that's right. So look. Yeah. So DAREBEE.com.
Yeah.
Like Buzzy Bee, lovely. Thank you. That was really good. I like picking apart as well the why we might struggle with certain things. And I think, the biggest thing as well is not, I can't say don't feel shamed, because I think we do. You
will feel shame, but allow the shame to be there, but not dictate what you can, the actions you can do to find something that you might really love and enjoy.
And like I say, it's about finding those things, and those things might keep changing as well. I think particularly if you're an ADHD, like I say, it might be that, I like this for a while, and now I like this. And but I think also what, dependent on who you are, and again, all sorts of factors that might play into whether you feel you can or can't, or the barriers that are actually in your way. But I, keep meeting different neurodivergent people who are into very interesting things, and then I get really annoyed and jealous at them because I'm like, I can't do that. That would just cause me pain. But I'm like, I wish I could do that thing. So, we had Amy Pearson on the last session, and she does aerial stuff. So like hanging from ropes from ceilings and
I'm laughing because I keep going to it, and it's no good for my vestibular system, my sense of balance at all. But I love the idea of it so much. I keep going back and then feeling car sick for the duration of the hour.
Right, so there you just demonstrated your neurology is not happy with that particular activity. I've also got friend Grayson, who's been on before, and he does like hoop and aerial stuff as well in these really amazing settings. And I think it seems there's quite a lot of neurodivergent people who gravitate to these sorts of things. And I think that's quite interesting. So, when Grayson talks about the people that he meets doing hoop, I think he just calls it hoop, or does he call it aerial? I can't remember. But when he talks about the people that he meets there and just how kind they are, everyone's really supportive, and I think that sounds nice. And it's you're having to focus so much on what you're doing that maybe that will help some people who really struggle to switch off and if they're worrying, because I don't think you can. I think you have to kind of switch off from everything else if you're hanging upside down from a hoop.
There's nothing more mindful than doing a really challenging activity, whether that's hanging upside down from an aerial hoop or that's lifting 100 kilos off the floor. All you can be is in your body at that point. So for ADHDers that struggle with the traditional concept of mindfulness, you don't have to do it being still. You can do it whilst
doing an activity. Or might be. Lovely. Thank you so much. So as we always end on our the same question, which is, what is your current or your favourite stim?
Well, because I'm an ADHD, I've been doing two throughout this session. So they're the two that come to mind. One is a really cute little bike chain twiddly thing, good for my fine motor. And I tend to use that one when I'm office based. And the other one is I've got a little stretchy resistance band, and I've been sitting here just twirling it up. But if I wasn't on a video call, chances are I'd probably be pulling at it in some way.
Lovely, nice. I'm sure I've got an exercise band around somewhere, because I was thinking we'll have a conversation another time, because I was saying to you I've been trying to do a single pull-up, and you said that there's potentially ways to build you up to that, and I was wondering, I saw somebody with an exercise band like around their feet to help.
Oh, there's so many ways you could use this.
We'll have that conversation. And I'm gonna be like, we want to know as well, how do we do a pull-up? But yeah, so just because that's reminded me, I don't think I've got a new one since I spoke with Kieran and Amy last, but it was quite interesting because we were talking about like echolalia, so like repeating words, and I was saying about me and Steve, we just make up nonsense songs and just sing them at the cat all day. Yeah. So Jasper just gets all these random songs just sang at him all day, and he's just like, what is going on? This is nonsense. That
has reminded me of this week. My favourite has been the kids by us shout my cat's name in a very particular way, Alice! And me and my partner have just been running around the house for most of the last week going, Alice!
Shouting Alice, saying that on cue. Hello, man.
Hello, Jasper.
The final little part. The thing is, I'm very lucky now. I've got an electric standing desk, and it's slightly too high for him. Are you going to try? Come on, then. Come on, say hello to everyone. There we go. So, everyone, say hello to Jasper.
Jasper.
We won't sing the songs about you today, though. But he's like, oh, look up here. Up here. No? He's like, no. But when I'm standing with the desk, because currently I'm sitting, it's far too high for him, and he's really annoyed. He's like, how am I supposed to get up and interrupt your Zoom calls if this desk is so high? Here he is, look. Little sassy pants. So thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Hopefully there was something. Let us know if there are any particular things that you might think were quite useful, or things that you might try. Or things that maybe we hadn't considered, because obviously there's so many different ways that we might struggle as neurodivergent and or disabled people. And that was just like a taster, because Sarah, I know you could talk about these sorts of things forever, because you love all these sorts of topics. So thank you, everybody, ever so much. Sarah, stay on, and we're just going to do our outro music and awkward wave until Ben presses the button. Wow.